seasons of the Spirit, faith practices, and outdoor ministry settings. Debbie lives in Derry, New Hampshire with her spouse and two teenage sons. Beside Debbie, the Reverend Shernell Edney has been one of the United Church of Christ's most active volunteer, justice-led trainers since the program was launched in 2009. Justice-led is Justice, Faith Formation, and Leadership Development program created by the United Church of Christ. Shernell has work experience in community organizing, chaplaincy, local churches, and currently works for Global Ministries at the Disciples of Christ headquarters in Indianapolis, where she supports justice education and advocacy related to global partnerships and ministries. Shernell is a member of the 2030 Clergy Network and a former member of the Council for Youth and Young Adults Ministries. She lives with her spouse and preteen son in Indianapolis and hails from Virginia. Next to Shernell, the Reverend Dr. Peter Wells served until recently on the staff of the United Church of Christ Massachusetts Conference, and his work included supporting congregational vitality and justice advocacy efforts in local churches. Along with his justice-led training partner, Shernell, who you just met, he has been one of the UCC's most prolific program facilitators for justice-led. Currently, he works with another colleague, Lizette Merchan-Pania, as a justice-led organizer on a part-time basis. They're supporting local churches and justice-led trainers with coaching and program support. Peter lives in Springfield, Massachusetts, is the parent of 2 young adult children, and is expecting his first grandchild, a new adventure. Next to Peter, the Reverend Nancy Rosas, one of the writers of the Homegrown Faith and Justice book, serves as Minister for Spiritual Formation at Washington Park UCC in Denver, and volunteers in wider church settings such as UCC Justice-Led as a program trainer and facilitator. She also directs the women's program at El Centro Humanitario para los Trabajadores, the Humanitarian Center for Workers in the Denver area, where she provides education for economic and social self-development for women and pastoral accompaniment. Next to Nancy, Amy Johnson, one of the writers of the Homegrown Faith and Justice book, is a youth director in her local United Church of Christ, as well as a prolific trainer and facilitator for the Our Whole Lives sexuality education program. She has a background in social work and currently works as a parenting and family consultant. Amy has 2 young adult children and lives in Federal Way, Washington. And finally, next to Amy, we have the Reverend Dr. Olivia Bryan Updegrove, who serves as one of the ministers for family and children's ministries with the Disciples of Christ, and in that role works collaboratively with the United Church of Christ in faith formation ministries for families and children. She has also served as a pastor in the local church. Olivia is the parent of 2 young children and currently lives in Milford, Ohio. So we'd like to begin with a more broad question around faith formation, and I'm going to direct the first question to Wade at our far left, or Debbie, who's next to him, who has the microphone. With the question, from what you have seen, what are current promising trends or best practices in faith formation with families?
There are probably a number of answers to that question, but the one I want to focus on is the ministry of intergenerational practices, particularly in local churches. I think there are a number of advantages to that. If in very small churches, it makes perfect sense because of the small numbers. You have to do almost everything together anyway. But for the adults, it gives them the opportunity to remember in all their ministries, particularly work with justice and in mission ministries, that this is something we are passing on to the next generations. This is something we want to see continuing into the future, and to have children right there doing that with you is a constant reminder that that is what's happening. For the children themselves and youth, it allows them the opportunity to experience role models in giving, serving, loving, doing justice. And even for the smallest ones, it ingrains in them the practice, so that as they grow up, they have that seed planted and they keep building on that so that they can make it a true practice as they grow into adulthood. I think I'll let Wade continue with his thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Debbie. What we're seeing, and what I'm excited about this new resource, Homegrown Faith and Justice, is thinking about how are we resourcing the family? How are we resourcing parents as we understand them to be the primary spiritual influences on a children and a youth's lives? And how can we do that better from the wider church perspective and from the local church perspective? I'm seeing a lot of energy around resourcing homes, around resourcing grandparents. How are we giving tools around a meal, in the car, on your way to a soccer meet? What are we doing to strengthen conversations that can be sacred, traditions, creating rituals for the families? It's one of the ways that I really see how can we live into understanding that the church can be home too. And to understand that as the church, it's not just a location that we go to on a Sunday morning and have a Sunday spirituality, but a daily practice that's lived with our families and resourcing the families, resourcing the homes. And so I'm really excited that this is another resource that the United Church of Christ is providing for families, and to really strengthen that ministry and that connection that we have there. So it's definitely a promising trend that we're seeing.
I agree with most of what Wade said pretty easily, but the one addition to that is, as we resource parents and families and whatever the family dynamic looks like, because it's just as varied as anything that we have. So not only are we resourcing, but we're entering in with these families to teach them faith formation that's not just biblical literacy, but also worshipful and really formative throughout a lifetime. The other side to that, as we resource these people, is making sure that families like me and all of you who are listening don't feel overwhelmed. Our lives are already so busy and full, and anytime somebody brings something new to us, we go, no, I can't do that. But amazing resources like this that are simple and yet still faithful and still bring depth and teach justice. So not just giving the right tools, but giving the tools that will be used and that people will have time to use in positive ways to do ministry beyond in the home. That goes in the home, back to church, out from the church, into the world, and back.
So thank you. So I'm going to direct the next question to Amy and Nancy, who are our primary writers for this resource. Can you tell us something about the resource that you'd like to lift up, that you hope will be especially encouraging or helpful to parents?
Yes, we had a lot of joy working with Amy and this resource. And we thought of families, facing every day, a busy life, but also their children facing different things, a world that is changing and challenging. So we hope that this resource can be a powerful tool for you as parents to learn, stories from our sacred scripture and how to teach your children. And if you don't have a lot of time, to have these conversations with them, we also created some rituals that you can do with them and engage as a family, maybe in your favorite places, maybe around the table, maybe when you are driving them to school, to make it, every time that you are with them, an opportunity to reflect on things that matters to you and to them, that can help them to have a foundation to create meaning around things happening every day.
Thanks, Nancy. It was really a joy to work on this project, and I think that what you said is really true for all of us that were working on it, that we wanted to respect the diversity of families today and to know that families are, like you said, Olivia, really busy and feeling a lot of pressure to do many, many things. And so our hope is that this resource isn't something that you feel like you have to use and do it so you can have perfectly faith-formed children, but that, that you can pick it up and you can, whether you have a child who's in preschool or you have a 17-year-old, it's not too late. We hope that you can find a conversation or an activity that would work for you and speak to you, as well as the broader scriptural and biblical themes that we have in there. So that's what I would lift up. I know it's not a specific thing, but when I was writing it, I really was holding in my heart that I wanted parents to know they're not alone. They don't have to be perfect. There are lots of small things we can do to create containers for our kids to have experiences that eventually will make them go, aha, this is important, or this is something that our family always did, or anything like that. So whether it's a conversation in the car or around the table or an activity that you intentionally make time for, we really hope this will be useful for you.
Great. So the next question for Amy and Debbie, if not more of you. It's often said that parents are the primary educators of their children, generally speaking, and we believe that parents have a primary and powerful influence in the shaping of their children's faith. One aspect of parenting, though, is that conversations about faith and teaching moments about social justice perhaps more often happen spontaneously and unpredictably, whereas in the church, they may more often be scheduled or involve prepared activities or prepared conversations, although not always. What would you say for parents are some of the benefits and the challenges of that spontaneity as it relates to faith formation moments with children?
Isn't that just the thing, right? Like we were talking earlier, they might be in the bathtub and ask you a question, and so the spontaneity, I think the challenge is, and the unplanned part is that we might be caught off guard and we might be actually thinking about our list of things that need to get done, or oh my gosh, it's already past bedtime and we're not there yet, or there's 14 things that need to happen before tomorrow morning, and all of a sudden we get a question that's, you know, we think, oh, we better answer this deeply and thoughtfully and faithfully. And maybe we can do that and maybe we can't. I think it's really okay to know who we are and answer the best we can, and to go back to it if we need to. I remember being on a walk one day with my son, and I think he was about 5, and he said, "Hey Mom, are we rich?" And I was just like, wow, I really better think how I answer this question, right? Because, you know, I wasn't feeling particularly rich at the moment, but I thought I need to say yes, because we have a house and we have 2 cars and we always have food and we have clothes to wear and we have food that we can give away. And so I said that to him, you know, and I don't even know if he remembers that, but it was a moment for me. And I think that that's one of the benefits and challenges of that spontaneity, is it calls us to really know who we are and to think about what we believe, and to do that in a very real way, to be really, really honest with ourselves. And because when you have to answer a question from a child, I mean, you better be being real, because they're going to know if you're not. So that's what I would say, and I'll pass the mic down to Debbie.
I want to go on a little bit about one of the challenges. In my work, some parents often come to me, and through their words, I can hear the guilt of, like what Olivia was saying. There's just not enough time to take on more. You know, I'm already doing everything I can think of with my children, and then there's the whole recruiting for Sunday school teacher process. They feel guilty if they say no, but in truth they don't have time. They feel guilty if they say yes because they don't feel like they know enough, or they said yes because they didn't want to say no and feel guilty. So it's that whole concept of feeling guilty because we as parents perhaps aren't doing everything we possibly can to help form our children in the faith. And how I want to respond to that is what you are doing, like Amy said, if you are being authentic and real, and sometimes even saying, I don't know the answer to that question, or let's go ask the pastor the next time we see her or him, those things will make an impression on the children that will stay with them. And the authenticity and the persistence of seeking out the answer to that question.
Thank you. And Olivia, and then I'll see if anyone else wants to respond as well.
The other benefit to the offhanded question or comment from the child that you have as a parent is you know your child. Not only are you in the position to respond, but as a parent, you know how your child responds, and you also know as a person of faith yourself that God will work in that response. So often, the best answer isn't answering, but is presenting the question back to the child. What do you think? What are your thoughts about it? And all of a sudden, you discover where that came from, and you also find in yourself how God is moving in that moment to where it may not be the right or wrong answer, but instead it may be the faithful answer at that time. So that's a huge benefit.
And so many times the child will come out with a response that's uncluttered by all the things that are in your head, and will be a true revealing moment for you, a faith-forming moment for you as well.
Thank you. Does anyone else feel called to respond to that particular question? Okay, we'll move on. We do have one question that has come in that I think we can insert into this one. How can we do rituals together without being face to face? Any thoughts on that? We've got some takers.
Yes. Well, I think that one of the blessings of the 21st century is technology. And I think, through phone, through Skype, as one who has family in 5 different countries, we do Skype, we do Facebook. And I think that over the phone, if possible, so one can, start and lead, give the instructions, and kind of wait for the other person to participate. And I think that there's a beautiful way, even if you are not in the same place, to be connected and to feel that you are with other members of your family, or family, by blood of choice, that you can be connected in that moment of being intentional about reflecting or doing something. So distance can be breached by the amazing gift of technology.
I agree with that 100%. And I'm thinking of some really simple things. Like I know in our church, it's been a tradition that on the first Sunday in Advent, there's a woman who comes and she gives the little chocolate Advent calendars out to everybody. They cost $1 or whatever. And she gives them out to all the children in the church. And boy, children is widely defined on that Sunday. And she also gives one to the oldest members that are there, which is another tradition that we have. And so, my kids are in college and beyond now, and I still get those little chocolate Advent calendars for them and send them off with them because it's a reminder of a tradition that we've had. And even though we're not together for most of Advent anymore, that's something that we can do. Or, sending them a card or a little care package or something to let them know that you're thinking of them. And also, again, the technology I think is really a beautiful gift to text questions or say, hey, we're all going to light this candle tonight at 7 if you want to do that too, or let's all get on the phone and talk about this or something like that.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to jump into a question for Shernell and Peter. You've both served as justice-led trainers, Justice Leaders Engaging and Developing program, which is justice faith formation and helping people to understand the justice dimensions of their Christian faith and why it matters for Christians to do social justice. So with that experience in mind, mostly having worked with adults, but also having some opportunities to work with youth and young adults in our midst, what have you learned as justice-led trainers that perhaps is helpful for parents to keep in mind as they think about how to share and convey their deeply held justice values that have to do with their faith?
I think one very important thing is to remember diversity of context. I think that understanding that contexts aren't always the same, especially in the home. What was valued and sacred to the parent may not be to your child, shock and awe, and being able to accept that. You know, I'm very quick to say, your life is not hard, you're 10. But, you know, your life is hard at 10, you know? I mean, it is awful that you passed a note and they didn't pass it back, you know? And so just remembering that that context is different, and once you let your child know that they are valued, no matter what it is, then they will start to respect your values as well. You can't say respect me and not respect them. So I think the diversity of context and valuing that context. I also think that, and this is from a parent perspective, and I've had to take that into my justice-led training, is authenticity. You know, the transparency aspect is so huge. Being able to say, I don't know. It is extremely liberating to be able to say to my child, I'm sorry. I should not have done that. Guess who messed up on that one? I did. And being able to let him know that just because I'm older, it doesn't always mean that I have the right answer. Wisdom does not always come with age. And being able to say, guess what? This is a teachable moment for both of us. Or you were the teacher in this moment. And so being able to diversify the context, but also validate the context and letting the child know that they have the power. I think that in certain times in life, we have these hot topic issues. At one time, it could be civil rights. At one time, it could be LGBTQA, and of course, with same-sex marriages in states. But also understanding that hot topic issues are not all that there is. There are also other things that are happening and evolving very quickly. Climate, environment, all of these things. And so the generation that's evolving today is not just involved in single-digit justice. There are a multitude of issues that we need to deal with at the same time. And it's almost, you know, if I can say this, almost like an ADD, ADHD. I mean, you know, we thrive in this. Like, you know, being able to handle more than one thing at more than one time, being able to multitask, and understanding the learning differences. I think that's another piece of it, learning differences. ADD, ADHD, kinesthetic learners, visual learners, being able to not only talk about justice, but to do it. The book is so fabulous in the sense that one of the things is that, yeah, you're reading it, but so much of it is action-oriented. And you can say, I'm reading the section for the 7 to 10-year-olds, or I'm reading the section from 11 to 14-year-olds, but there's a fluidity about it that allows you to be able to take pieces and to be able to put them all together. So I think that all of those are important. Peter?
I don't know the answer. Oh, no, I'm supposed to answer. When my youngest son was young, he was in one of those wading pools, and another little kid bopped him on the head with goggles. I don't know why you needed goggles in a wading pool, I don't know. But the father came over, grabbed the young child by the hand, held his hand up, and swatted him on the backside, and said at the very same moment, we don't hit people. So, and I'm sitting there going, okay, do you just hit? So, a part of what I think justice led, part of hopefully what we try to do in our congregations is match our actions, our words, I guess, our actions to our words. That old saying, don't do what I say, do what I say, don't do what I do. You know, it's wrong right from the beginning. And I think that we don't know the example we are actually setting for our children all the time. And it's a scary thing when you begin to see yourself in your child. My kids are now 20-something and early 30s, and I see myself and I go, oh, dear me. But we don't know. So matching our words, our actions to the call of faith and teaching. I think we teach in our homes in those moments in the bathtub, but we also teach in those moments when we say we're going to a march, come and take the age-appropriate child to the march, or go and come back and share the experience. And the reason that we're called to that, not just because it's a good idea to feed the hungry, but because God says, feed the hungry. So.
Thank you to both of you. I appreciate I think the role of humility is what I'm hearing in some of the responses, to name when we don't know something, generally or specifically about God or the ways of faith, to name that. And when we make mistakes, to own up to that, and to model justice with our actions that match what we're trying to teach and tell our children. So I'm going to turn for a moment to another question that came in. How, and we may have to some extent provided a response for this, but there may be other thoughts in the way this is phrased. How can we provide church at home for our young families as faith formation leaders? And that kind of connects with the question that was our next question. How do you think faith formation leaders in the local church impact or support or equip the parents in their midst for sharing their faith with their children? And how can they do it if they're looking for support in how to help their families? Okay. Moving on. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Next. I do think that one of the important things is being able to let go of tradition. For me, as an ordained minister, church is not what it is for other people in the pew. It's work. So we don't get family time at church. So if we want church, we have to make it at home. And so one of the ways in which we've done that is being able to, if you feel like singing a song while you're cooking dinner, sing it. If you feel like talking about it, being able to open it up. Middle school curriculum now talks about polytheism and monotheistic culture. That is an excellent time to start talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So it's being able to break away from the tradition and being able to open up your home to have those, maybe taking some of those spontaneous moments and making them purposeful moments. Remember when you asked me about that? Let's sit down and let's talk about that. Look at Wikipedia. You know, any of it. I really do think that those are times that can be made together, and even over dinner, being able to have church looking at what it traditionally is. It's not about getting dressed and going somewhere. It's about the fellowship. It's about the connection. And providing fellowship and connection at home means that you have church there.
And where's the intersection with faith formation leaders and staff and volunteers and their role in supporting some of those things?
And there's a resource out there online, vibrantfaithathome.org, and they offer little scripts and suggestions for family devotionals that you can easily do at home. For church staff who have specific things that they hope that their families would do, they can create their own or base it on something they find, some other resources they find, put them on the church website so they're accessible there, send them as an email blast to the families perhaps, tweet something, you know, a Pinterest board, I don't know. But, you know, use the technology out there to reach in that way. I just want to add one more thing, a different side to that question that you asked. You know, how can churches support what the families are doing? I think families, especially families with young children, really need to hear from church staff and particularly the congregation, maybe particularly older members. You know, this is thank you for bringing your young children to worship today. It was such a joy to hear their joyful noise during the service, and maybe lifting up some of the things that they see those children acquiring and assimilating as they attend worship and some of the church activities.
Yeah, as a Minnesota conference, we've used Vibrant Faith Ministries quite a bit. It comes out of a Lutheran tradition, more or less, but they've really branched out. And some of the tools that they've provided is Faith Talk cards, which are a wonderful resource to provide for families in your church so that you can have the deck of cards on your dinner table. They are centered around 4 keys around carrying conversations. It might be, how are you more like your mom or your dad? And so as a child asks that to their parent, And then they start getting insight into their grandparents and how we're like each other. Also, rituals and traditions, what do those look like? Service for others, and then also devotions around those cards of what is maybe God, what's a God moment for you? What might death mean? Some really important times where we listen to each other, where we come to those places of just being with each other, attending to each other, practicing our faith. Those are the things that I think we can provide for families to practice being church. And I think that's what church is really good at, is listening to each other, being with each other, asking those questions, and actually listening. That, to me, is what church is best at. And so hopefully we can provide those kinds of resources for our families to be church at home as well.
I wanted to add one thing really quickly that occurred to me while you all were talking and talking about justice issues. And we've all been encouraging the use of technology and giving resources, which is wonderful. And then I had a couple of young girls in my youth group say to me recently, "Oh, we don't have internet anymore," which made me realize that, all this work I've been doing to try to, utilize all this wonderful technology, and I have some kids that don't have internet. And so I need to also do things like make a phone call or send a card or, do those old-fashioned traditional things that we do. And just one quick story about church at home. It's Advent's coming up, and a long time ago when my kids were really young, I decided I think I was volunteering as a Sunday school teacher at that time, and my son was 3, and I decided we were going to do some celebration of Advent, and the way that we were going to do that was to have an Advent wreath. We still have it. It's pretty ratty now because it was made out of cardboard and fake greenery, and a few candles. And we were going to, at Grace, light the candle of the week and say what we wanted. And the first candle is the candle of hope. And since he was 3 and I knew that he really wanted the red fire engine for Christmas, I was pretty sure that he was going to say, "I hope for a red fire engine." And that was just okay with me because I knew that we could grow with this as time went on. At the time also, my brother-in-law was struggling with brain cancer. And so we light the candle and we go around, and my 3-year-old son says, not, "I hope for a red fire engine." He says, "I hope Uncle Brian gets better." And so to me, that was about setting a stage and being intentional and having some opportunity to, just providing the opportunity for Grace and God to be there in this ritual that we were setting up. And talk about a church moment at home. That was just a beautiful thing. I will say that not every Advent moment was like that. I mean, there were times that it was fighting over who was going to light the candle and the candle tipping over and almost burning up the, paper greenery. But there were also many, many times over the years, and still to this day when we're all together, that we've had some beautiful moments around it too. So.
Just a quick follow-up when you're talking about listening. I think one of the things we talk a lot in the Justice-Led program is the difference between dialogue and debate or deep listening. And my experience is, but particularly working with congregations for 11 years, believe it or not, that, we don't really know how to listen. And it's almost, to teach our within the congregations how to carry on sacred conversations, how to listen deeply to each other, and how to learn from each other. And that, I think, as we teach young people as well as adults, can't help but seep into our home life as well, to say this is part of practice that we can also do in our homes. Working with parents and saying, how do you have those difficult conversations, around all those difficult issues that come when the child is around 10.
We've lifted up Vibrant Faith. There's Parent Further, there's Pockets Magazine, and a lot of the curriculums that we do use are coming out with take home this week for your family, or bulletins that you use and take home. But what all of these are trying to really overcome, in my experience, is there are so many parents out there who are just scared to even enter into the conversation with their children. We're mostly clergy or people sitting here going, we can do this. But there are a lot of parents who sit there and come to me and go, I don't know what to do. I don't even know enough about my own faith story. And all of these are starting to say, you know what? You can do it. It's not that hard. We will support you. We will give you tools. We will create resources. But you can do it. And not only can you do it, it is so important that you're willing to be brave and do it. I think about that when you were talking. I am that mom. My kids are so bad in church. And I got a 2-year-old, goldfish are everywhere, pretzels are everywhere, the 9.5-month-old has lost her sock. People are giving me the dirty looks. And I sit there and go, I am going to sit here. Because it is a ministry to just sit here and smile at those people and force them to listen to the joyful noises of my obnoxious children. And so I guess one of the things that I really want to lift up is that parents can do it. Moms can do it, dads can do it, families can do it. We have resources, we have connections. And as someone working on your national staff, I am working really hard to make sure you know what those are, so that you can find the resources and ways to do that. So don't be afraid. It's not that scary. We can do it.
Thank you. So before we go into the next question, I want to lift up that there may be people watching who are raising or participating in the support of children who are not their own biological or adopted children. So there are grandparents, aunts and uncles, mentors, full-time nannies, babysitters, and communities of faith who really see those children as their own and part of a wider church family. So that the children in our lives teach us as we go along. I had mentioned earlier, and many of us have had this experience, that we, go into ministry and learn to talk in more formalized settings perhaps and lead youth or children's ministries, and then when the children in our own lives come to us with questions, they throw us off our game a little bit. Let Aunt Kelly get back to you. That's what I want to see, and having my own young children and just realizing that I'm going to mess it up every once in a while, and we're all doing the best that we can, and that's what I'm hearing is a word of encouragement that not everyone feels that comfortable talking about their faith or that well-equipped to talk about their faith. And maybe just given some of that encouragement and reality, that parents are scared or nervous reality. Peter or Shernell or Nancy perhaps talking about the justice-led, not the program itself, but some of the content and the ways that people maybe not comfortable in talking about their faith are encouraged or given opportunities to kind of stretch that a little bit.
Well, I'll just say it first and I'll pass it off. I think what I'm hearing here is a reminder of the importance of adult faith formation. Before I took the job in the conference, I was a pastor of a church for 18 years, where many of the parents actually did go to adult classes. And I think back now, that helps explain why many of our young people stayed after confirmation, in part because they saw that their parents saw that was important. But the importance of doing the adult formation as well. I mean, and offering classes on faith development. And justice-led is rooted in biblical and theological groundings, that we don't just act because it's a good idea to love our children, but we're actually called to love our children. It is a good idea, by the way, to love your children. Hard as it can be sometimes.
One of the other great things about J-Led that I have always said is that it does not set the agenda for you. You are allowed to set the agenda. You are allowed to say what the injustice is for you and for your context. And so you don't go in and learn how to deal with racism. You don't go in and learn how to deal with poverty. You get to label what it is. And because there is such a diversity of issue, I love what you said, Peter, about adult faith formation, because the truth of the matter is I'm not a minister because I have it figured out. I'm a minister because I'm actively trying to figure it out, and I'm okay with that. And so being able to call out the various things, because Peter and I are partners, one of the best exercises ever is to ask people what they first think about us when they first see us. And you would be surprised what the answers are, especially when they see us together. And so I think allowing people the room and space to be open about that and not looking down on them, being able to say, hey, well, guess what we thought about each other? Do you want to share that story? And, later. It opens the floor to be able to say, oh, wow, we can really think that and be Christian too. And it's okay. It's really okay, because the first part of being Christian is being human. And so once we accept that humanity, it gets better from there. One of the things that I love to be able to say is the divinity of humanity, right? There's a divineness about being human, about opening that door up and being able to say, look at me and all my flaws and look at how God works in them. And I think that justice-led is one of those great things that if you allow it to work for you, and allow it to work for your community and context, it can shine the light, the divine light, on the humanity, and it will work.
No, and just to add to that when we bring curriculums and formations such as justice-led, also, there are things that are more accessible to families once they have that rooted, spiritual formation, a scriptural basis to do the work and the reflection. With children, to invite them to actually learning by doing. I'm thinking about some of the children from my church going to the Capitol building, on Good Friday, to invite the community to reflect and to stop the violence. And I remember in one of these occasions when we have one of our preteens doing one of the readings, and one of our littlest one just sitting there watching. And so our children also are learning through our example, as many of you have said, by watching us walking with them and talking about what is hard happening in our world, but we're doing it together, that we don't have to do it alone.
Thank you. So a question that has come in, to ask, and I'm going to direct this toward perhaps Wade and Amy initially, what you see trending in youth ministry, especially as it relates to creating community without borders, kind of beyond the walls of our church, and reaching youth beyond the church or young adults beyond the church.
Oh, good. I get to talk about our whole lives. I will say that is one venue that I think is really important and a wonderful...
And can you say what that is again?
Yes, Our Whole Lives is a sexuality education program, a lifespan and comprehensive program with a faith overlay piece called Sexuality in Our Faith. And that is an amazing ministry, and I think that it's one that as it grows and as people embrace it, in their different congregations can and does, and I've seen it serve youth and young adults and families alike. And especially if you're able to open it up to community members and have a group of people coming together to learn about values and what's really on their mind when they're in adolescence and going through the changes that come along with puberty and relationships and social pressures and all of that kind of stuff. I think that is one of the really amazing ministries that we have in our denomination, and it's available to all of us. So that's one thing that I would say.
I would say in the United Church of Christ, we have more than 30 outdoor ministry sites, camps and retreat centers. it's an amazing gift that the church has given to our young people, to our congregations, to form community in intentional ways, in ways of being safe, of ways of questioning things about your faith with each other. And so to me, it would be encouraging our young people and our families. In the Minnesota Conference, we've done a lot of work around intergenerational camp focus, around bringing a whole congregation together to be a part of that ministry with other congregations as well. So you're creating a community that's outside of those walls of your church and creating that community now in nature, in a safe place, in a place of true intergenerational. As you were talking, Debbie, one of the trends in church that we need to really pay attention to is how are we creating places for intergenerational connection? Because we also know if we want our young people, and maybe we don't always know this actually, but we need 3 or 4 folks who love on our kids, who know them, who know their stories, who ask about their ball game or their concert, or are connecting with them in the kitchen at church or in the technology room, that they're building 3 to 4 significant relationships that aren't being paid and that aren't their parents in relationship. How are we providing those places in our congregations? Using our outdoor ministry sites is an amazing opportunity and an amazing way that we can do that and lift up that ministry in those places around the United States in our outdoor ministry sites.
Thank you. Is there someone else who wants to speak to faith formation, meeting youth or young adults beyond our walls?
Yes. Proud plug, globalministries.org. So, Global Ministries is a joint ministry, for those of you who don't know, between the United Church of Christ and the Disciples of Christ, a Christian church. And within Global Ministries, we have a program called People to People. And in that program, we take people of all ages, but particularly youth, and we connect them with some of our partners in other countries. So we totally leave the United States of America. We actually had a group that just went not too long ago, went down to Mexico, and they were able to connect with some of our youth partners down there. And what the youth partners have done is to get youth from their community. And so they're meeting people not only in the church, but outside of the church. And that is a wonderful, wonderful way to be able to step outside. And we actually have a slogan that we sometimes use, and it's God without borders and mission without boundaries. And so, you know, we're talking about a God that sees beyond the denomination, it sees beyond our local church, and seeks to connect us who we are and who we are. And People to People is a wonderful way to do that. Again, globalministries.org. There you go.
Great, thank you. I briefly, for a while, I served as interim minister for youth and young adults ministries, and would often in that setting have questions from people in youth ministries who are really struggling with this question. So I know that there's no easy or formulaic answer that any one of us could give that meets every situation perfectly, but I will say that often enough, someone would, I'd say, well, what have you been doing to try to reach youth or young adults who are in your community? And they would say, we changed some of our music and worship. And we tried to change our youth programming a little bit, or our Sunday school to be more inclusive. And those are great things, but the next question had to be, the next kind of reflection had to be, does anyone kind of walk in the door to find out if they don't already know that you're there, and they're not already a member? So it might serve someone who comes sporadically, but if you're trying to reach people in your community, the first thing we have to do is put up on the shelf, maybe forever, the expectation that young adults are going to walk in our doors and sit in our pews, and we'll meet them there. That the first thing we have to do is start asking, where are they in our community? What do they care about? What are they doing with their time? Where are they concerned about justice or community? And just where are they? And what do they need? And how might we help meet that need where they are? And refocus that question. And that's not an answer. If I had it, I'd bottle it, sell it for a small price, and donate it to Justice and Witness Ministries and the Neighbors in Needs program. But I don't. So that's one reflection. And I heard in Wade's response and a couple others, Nancy, some mention of intergenerational ministries. So perhaps another question that could be asked is, have you seen or witnessed some best practices in intergenerational ministries that might be an opportunity for families to learn about faith and more specifically to practice doing justice? If we think about justice advocacy opportunities, public witness opportunities to kind of learn about, but also little things that can help them put into practice. Have you seen opportunities for that?
Yes, one of the things that I noticed in my local church is when we started to reframe, how we're doing the intergenerational services. And sometimes, the practice had been to make the children's kind of the token of the service. But I remember one of my mentors, Dr. Vincent Harding, who say there would be children's ministry when the children become the ministers. So one of the things that we have done is to create what we call a children's nest for the littlest one to be in church while everything is happening, to have one of the children be part of the liturgies, do the readings, and instead of a children's sermon, to have one of the children or youth, and we have an adult's time, so that the adults will come forward and hear from the wisdom of the children and the youth. So the children and the youth become our ministers, the ones who are teaching, and also serving communion, different ways that we involve directly in leading worship, so that they become the minister to the whole congregation. And when it comes to things that the children can get engaged in justice issues, it could be as simple as probably raising money for UNICEF and having a time for the children and families to reflect on what does it mean, that in this country you have everything that you might need or might not, but other children in other countries are needing basic things that most children will have. Also, in creating whatever project we are doing in service, to include the children and to make it intergenerational. It could be over lunch, over cookies, coffee time, to include the children and youth in those conversations and actions.
I just wanted to throw out an idea too in terms of intergenerational work around justice, and this is just a really simple idea, but in our small church, we have at times, so for instance, last year we were collecting blankets and socks for homeless people in our community, and we called it Throws and Toes, and we made it a challenge, can the youth group get more than the men's fellowship and the women's fellowship, or we've had a canned food drive for Mission 1, and okay, over 50 and under 50, go. So those kind of things can help kind of bring people together and energize around justice opportunities. Do you have something?
Yeah, just to tag on to both of those, there are opportunities such as One Great Hour of Sharing, where they offer resources for children and sometimes families to do together. And I want to challenge congregations to use those for the entire congregation, because sometimes I fear that when children see the adults putting something in the plate for a specific offering, and then the children have this activity over here, that they think, oh, well, we're really supposed to be putting something in the plate, and this is just, for us to play with. But if the whole congregation is doing the hands-on, collecting the blankets and the socks, and the children are too. They're going, they're going with mom and dad to help purchase one, or they're finding one in the closet that's still in good condition, they haven't used for a while. Then they know they are really a part of doing justice and service as as God's children, as we all are God's children.
I think it occurred to me that in the presence of children taking communion, and in the former church I served, everyone was invited to take communion, and I did have somebody come to me one time and says, well, do the children really understand this, you know? And I said, well, do you? And it then occurred to me, and that line in the baptism when Jesus became indignant, angry, which is indignant is a religious anger, that they were blocking the children. So anything we can do to have the children come in and be a part of it and incorporate, and also talk with them at, I'm not an educator, so at the appropriate level, but to talk with them as we collect those cans, to have the conversation. Why are we collecting cans? Why are there people in the richest nation in the world who are hungry? Let's talk about why, and those kind of questions. But that whole issue of welcome the children in, because Jesus got really ticked off when they didn't. Remember that. So.
Anyone who has worked in social justice knows that there needs to be creativity, because usually social justice doesn't come with a lot of money. Nonprofits aren't rolling in dough, and so you have to get creative, and that's really true when you're working with anybody on the margins, including children. My least favorite thing to see is the 16 and over. And I know that insurance-wise, so many mission and opportunities have to be 16 and over. But I have gotten creative beyond that. And let the children lead, and the parents will follow, and the adults will follow too. But I've gone to food banks with 4-year-olds who have filled up the boxes. I've had kids every year make doggy biscuits for the Humane Society so that they can take them there. They have communion, they give their offerings, and they go. They do it. They hand nails to the person while they're nailing the board. You don't have to be the one moving the hammer to get the work done. And so I encourage our churches to be creative. Teach our kids to take care of their church, take care of their homes, take care of their rooms, and in the process, they will learn to take care of their world and other people. And don't wait until they're 16 and over. Get creative. They will do the work.
As the parent of a 2- and 4-year-old who'd like to help vacuum the rug and fold the laundry, I often will help them or let them help me, and then when they go to bed, I actually have to redo it. So sometimes the point is not about the productivity so much as the teaching moment and being inclusive and letting them in. I'm hearing a couple of other things that I wanted to lift up. One, some of the things about the Justice-Led program that I've come to really value is helping people make the distinction about serving people in a situation of need, but loving our neighbor by directly serving or meeting their needs, and loving our neighbor by advocating for them for systemic, legislative, social, bigger structural changes that may impact their lives. And we affirm that both are really important, but it helps people to kind of understand the value and distinction in serving someone who's hungry at a soup kitchen and asking questions about legislation that may impact the continuation of unemployment, the continuation of problems that contribute to people being hungry. And that both are lifted up as, you know, the greatest commandments we have are love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and love our neighbor as ourself. And those are expressions of loving our neighbor as ourself that are both worthy and valid. And Wade, you mentioned the outdoor ministries sites, and that's one of the places where I witnessed a youth camp where the kind of loving the neighbor concept was explored, and they thought about and wrote down and journaled about ways that they had directly supported, or their church had directly supported, the needs of people within their communities or beyond. But then they started to talk about and think about who were the people in power in their communities and beyond, their senators, their congresspeople, their mayors, and then they chose somebody. We got the names for them and the addresses, and they picked a justice issue that concerned them, and they sat down and wrote letters. And they did that at church camp, and we mailed them off. And that was a profound experience for me as someone to witness the things that they wrote in those letters, like you said earlier, uncluttered by the things that we're thinking about. So there are ways that we can be creative and inclusive that are real teaching moments, not only for them, but for us as we watch what they actually know and how they'll put it into practice if we'll let them. And that's some of the things that I'm hearing that I wanted to lift up. So I wanted to invite each of you to share a word, if you would like. What's a word of comfort, encouragement, or loving challenge? Something that you might offer to often busy, overcommitted parents as they wrestle with how in their lives they'll raise their children to be faithful and justice-minded.
Well, let me back up a little bit, and I would say I'm going to talk about our churches. I deal more with churches, and they're often, I think, suffering from some low self-esteem as well, doing some amazing ministry, amazing faith formation ministry. And so how are we coming alongside of them saying, hey, good job? In the Minnesota conference, what we've started is a Faith Forming 5 initiative, where we're encouraging churches around how are you providing at-home resources? How are you doing intergenerational ministry? In what ways are you including children and youth in worship? What are you doing around theological reflection with service and mission? So you go out on the highway and you clean up. Are you taking a moment to say, where was God in this experience? And most of the time they are doing that. And so how can we say, hey, this is what it's about? And then lay in clergy leadership development. And so what we're doing is inviting congregations to share those stories and realizing our churches are doing really good faith formation ministry, intentional ministry, thoughtful ministry, and engaging, and they're changing lives. I think we need to really celebrate that. And so how can we, as the wider church, celebrate we are doing some really good ministry right now? It's not just that we need to aspire to it, but we also need to celebrate it. And I think we need to hold that as one of our better practices and continue in that.
I'm going to also take a second.
Respond as you need to.
Oh, thank you. I will. I've been reading up on child development. Well, I always have, but the latest thing I've been reading is studies are showing more and more what we've always known, if you've worked with children, that between the ages of 2 and 6, their brains are just really plastic and elastic, and they're sucking everything in, everything unfiltered, good, bad, positive, negative. But what I didn't know, and that I just read, is that 90 to 95% of the subconscious of what we do as adults, based on our subconscious, is what we learned between the ages of 2 and 6. So if you think, the times you say to yourself, my mother always did that. Well, yeah, you were watching that between the time you were 2 and 6. And so what I want to say to parents is, what you are doing intentionally and faithfully with your children right now is really, really, really important. And don't stress out about it. On the other hand, just keep that in the back of your minds and know that we need to celebrate everything that is being done.
I would say one word more than one word, of like 5 or 16, of hope or encouragement for parents. Just going really old school, 2 Corinthians 4:8. We are pressed on every side. Everything is trouble. It's what it feels like sometimes, what is going to go right and when. And so feeling like it's going to get better. it's going to get better. And having those moments where you step back and you say, it's okay. And something I was thinking about when you were talking was the stairs of development, the developmental stairs, and understanding that as smart as we may think we are and as many degrees as we may have behind our names, that there are times when we are 6 and 7. And there are times when we are 15 and 16. If that happened in our life, accepting that and being able to say, okay, I am not mature enough to handle this moment. I am not emotionally prepared for this moment, even as an adult. And so I think just a good word of hope is to remember that it's okay. And it's not going to be perfect, and we can keep striving for that perfection. But if we accept the reality of the situation, we'll breathe a whole lot easier. And knowing that this is a period, it is a point in life, the dark ages, as some of us call it with preteen children, but it is a period, a moment in time that will pass, and it'll get better.
I'd like to just say amen. I work with, in my work too, I want to amen what you said, that I work with over 140 congregations, I think over 11 years, somewhere in there, and there's not a one of them that I worked with that wasn't demonstrating God's love in some real way, both and doing social justice work in that whole range that we talk about, and I do want to celebrate that. It does come to mind the quote I heard from my former boss, that God loves you just the way God loves you just the way you are, but too much to let you stay that way. And in the sense, I mean, we start there, but we can always be striving. But beginning, because I agree, I think many of our congregations suffer from a real low self-esteem, and who would join? If you go to these churches, I wouldn't join because they feel so, but to begin to look at what is going on and celebrate and give thanks for that, because things are going on, and to remember there are people driving right by your church right now who want what you have. They don't know you have it, though.
Well, like Shernell, I have many words. And I would say to parents, you don't have to do this alone. And that's why we do it in community, because that's a lot of work for one person, for two persons to do it. And that's why we come together at church and in community, so that we can share that, so that it's not only you loving and seeing and caring for your child or your children or your nieces or nephews or grandkids. It's a whole community that get to love them and to celebrate them. And I also will say to the faith educators, you know, sometimes the best that you can do is to listen to the children. I often encourage people that work in spiritual formation with me at church, you know, forget about the curriculum, listen to what they have to say. I remember in particular one time someone say, we don't buy at this store, and the other kid says, why? And then this kid started explaining all the reasons why that had to do with you know, fair wages for the workers. And I was like, how do you learn all that? And he said, my mom and dad. So I want to celebrate those parents that, you know, you may not think that you are teaching your children about faith, about justice, about fairness, but they are listening. They are watching what you do, what you say, and they are talking about. So to the faith formation leaders also we say, if you hear these conversations, these moments, share with the parents. I am here with my friends saying, encourage the parents, celebrate what you see in their children so that they can remember, you know, we can encourage each other, we can do it together.
Well, I'd like to echo that too. I'd like to say you are doing it. You are doing it every day. And God is love, and you love your children, and you are doing faith formation with your family all the time. I also have a couple pieces of advice that are standard, which is stay flexible and keep your sense of humor. And then my pastor, Dennis Hollinger-Lant, Wayside United Church of Christ, Federal Way, Washington, has this great thing that he says about a sign that he has over his bedroom door. And it says, he sees it every day when he walks out. And it says, why pray when you can worry? And it's worded that way to make you think. So, so my other word of encouragement would be to pray.
The irony to this statement is that one of the best pieces of faith formation and ritual that I have with my family and my children is that silence is sacred conversation. That the most precious moments so many times of the day are at night, after the stories are read, after the prayers have been said aloud, and just sitting there with my child, holding them and loving them and praying for them and praying for our world. And so I'm talking too much about silence, but that's really one of the most important things. You don't have to know all the answers. You just have to be present. And presence and the ability to listen is truly God working.
So I would share with... Hello. Just my encouragement to faith formation professionals, because we realize that you probably are fielding a lot of questions as well from parents, and if they don't ask the questions, they may be watching what we're doing in the church and trying to get some ideas and kind of learn in that community. And we, as those of us who work in faith formation, also wrestle with those questions in our own personal lives and in the church. I've been, if you've seen me looking to my left, I'm looking at the screen and recognizing, at least for November 22nd, the live stream version of this conversation, for those of you watching live, there is a conversation that's going on with kind of back and forth between people already sharing ideas, which is fantastic. So I'll first share my kind of word of encouragement is from a memory when I was a teenager and had experienced some probably love drama as a teenager and I was angry and upset and didn't want to talk to my mother about what was going on. And she came into my room and said, you don't have to tell me what's going on now, but I need you to know that if at any time in your life you need to tell me anything, that there's nothing you could say or do that would ever change how much I love you or my willingness to sit with you and try to help. And when Scripture tells us how deep and profound God's love is so much greater than what we even understand and glimpse as human beings, your willingness to just express the depth of your love on a regular basis to your child and talk about how much greater God's love is helps day by day to build that sense of trust and kind of in their bones knowledge that they're worthy of something, and then to bridge that conversation to help them understand that as God's children, we're all worthy of that depth of love. That's really foundational to justice, that everyone is born with that worthiness. And so I guess that would be what I would contribute. And my hope is that if you are watching and you're a faith formation professional, volunteer, you're involved in that work, that you would find some encouragement here, but that also if your questions weren't answered in this, we will post the bios and the email contacts for all the people who were here so that you can follow up with us individually. If there are questions that you have, comments that you have, resources that you wanted to know more about. We also would like to, because this was kind of a pilot situation, we wanted to further have conversation about faith formation that would be relevant to those working in the church and those who are doing the work at home. If you have ideas, topics, suggestions for how webinars or live stream gatherings might further support you with faith formation, please share those with me, share those with us when we provide that contact information, because we'd like to know how we can utilize online technology to support the work of the church around faith formation and other needs and resources. So this is the beginning, we hope, of other ways that we might be supportive and mutually supportive in this work and relationship. Any other last thoughts?
How do they get
One last resource, too, that we definitely want to push. If you're ready for homegrown justice and if you're ready to engage in faith formation, then you are also ready for a brand new curriculum from Global Ministries entitled Ready. And it actually stands for Revolutionary, Engaged, and Driven Youth. And it is a way to enable communities of faith, but also you can take this into a local community and be able to use it. It's engaging and equipping our youth to be able to recognize first, who am I? 3 questions that are asked throughout the entire curriculum. Who am I? Who are they, and who are we? And so it's a way to be able to dissect who am I in this world, in this century, as it moves along. Who are they? Who are the others? Are they the people across the street or the people across the country? And who are we together as we attempt to make this world a better place? And so that's just one more resource, globalministries.org/youth.
One more shameless plug. Young adult service communities are provided opportunities, internships in local churches for intentional communities of young adults to spend a year engaging in service and justice with congregations and wider communities and exploring together with spiritual mentors, doing vocational discernment and spiritual growth and reflection on the work that they're doing and what it means for their lives and their callings, whether that's in a ministry setting or in a secular location. So Global Ministries and wider church ministries also support that work. We'd like to thank you for joining us and look forward to future conversations with you. Thanks.